Hey fam, welcome to the Freetrail Podcast and our new presenting sponsor. We're so happy to now be working with The Feed. Thefeed.com/Freetrail is where you need to go. It is the one-stop shop for all your training and racing nutrition needs. They have over 200 of the world's best nutrition brands stocked in one website. It's a fantastic resource. We've been big customers for a long time. We're really proud to work with them. Some of my favorite products that you can find at thefeed.com/Freetrail. Gnarly Nutrition Whey Protein Powder. I like the chocolate flavor. I have some of this after every one of my workouts and long runs. For in-run nutrition, Orange Drank. You'll see my big dumb face on it. Also from Gnarly Nutrition, enhanced sodium concentration here in the world's best fueling drink mix. Finally, HVMN, Ketone IQ. I have 2 of these ketone shots basically every single day, once before I go running and once in the middle of the afternoon when I need a little extra energy. Go to thefeed.com/Freetrail and you're going to get an $80 credit, free money to spend at thefeed.com. It'll be $20 right away and then $20 every 90 days thereafter. You'll also get a sweet Trail Running Will Save the World water bottle. Again, that's thefeed.com/Freetrail. You'll get $80 credit to spend on your favorite nutrition products. And if you are international, they do ship internationally as well. So you can take care or at least take advantage of that great offering from The Feed. Big thanks to The Feed for supporting and thank you for watching the podcast. Karl Meltzer, the speed goat, the icon. Welcome to the Freetrail Podcast, buddy. It's good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. It's cool. It's an honor to be on it, man. It's been a while since you started. I'm glad we finally reached out and we're connecting.
It's been a long time coming, man. And yeah, you've come up in conversations a couple of times. I'll fill you in a little bit more later. But of course, you're a legend of the sport, one of my personal heroes. And this has been a long time in the works. And I'm glad to finally put it together. Of course, we have to start in my traditional place. Karl, you're prepared for this. My opening question is, what makes you you? What are your quintessential character attributes? What makes the speed goat the speed goat?
Simplicity. Well, I'm a very simple person. I like to learn things the hard way, and that's probably by failing. Whether that's being, running or whatever, but outside of running, whether it's building a rock wall or using a router or doing the dishes, I always seem to do things to learn the hard way, and I keep things very simple with everything that I've done. And my wife has always said, you're a simple man. I'm like, exactly. Why be complicated? Because the more complicated you are, the more complicated things get, right? In all of life. So I take life like one day at a time. I honestly say a lot that, live first, die later, or work to live, don't live to work kind of thing. It's always been my attitude that way. And because I think in general, we only have one time on earth, right? So it's like you can take the standard career path and go to school and get a job and all that kind of stuff and, have a career and make money and all that stuff's great. But I went to live where I wanted to live. And then I found a job instead of found a job and went there. So I don't know. What really defines me is that I'm just a basic, simple person. I try to be very humble and help others and things like that. But at the same time, I'm also a little bit, I can be selfish too. I think we all can be sometimes, depends what it is. But I'm enjoying life as I can, and when it's over, it's over. Yeah. So I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop pushing forward. It's been a fun ride so far. So I might as well stay on the train.
Man, and you have been continuing to push forward in such an amazing way, and we'll talk about that. Simplicity and learning the hard way. It makes me want to ask. I noticed that you're doing some woodworking projects. Is that an example of having to learn the hard way?
Yeah. That particular project you're talking about is a table and I'm building in Ridgeway, Colorado at my new house. Like most things in my life, that's come to me randomly on ideas. And that came to me as an idea from Jamil Corey when I ran the Coldwater Rumble. He had this kind of his logo built out of some plywood and some stuff. And I was like, that's kind of cool. And then before you know it, I'm digging into my router and doing this stuff. I haven't finished it yet. I built a table on the side as a practice to pour resin into it. So anyway, it's a different story. But I like doing that kind of stuff too. And as I've gotten older, I like to say I'm retired. I mean, I'm not retired. I run still. I work, I run for HOKA. I coach people, everything else. But I like to feel like I'm retired. And that's one of the projects, kind of things I like to do in that table that you saw.
I want to talk a little bit more about that balance of retirement and unretirement a little bit later on. But I was thinking about a fun place to jump off in this conversation. And I came across that iconic photograph of a parking lot trailhead that's been shared in various places online. But in the photo are yourself, Scott Jurek, Hal Kerner, and Anton Krupicka. And apparently Ian Torrance was the photographer. And of course, all 5 of you guys are first ballot Hall of Famers. That picture belongs in the trail running Smithsonian. And it feels like that run is an untold story. So let's use this as a fun place to jump off. Tell us about that particular run where that iconic photo emerged and any stories or memories from it.
Yeah, we got together. I live in Sandy, Utah. That photo is up at Alta, so about 15 miles up the road from my house in Sandy. And I believe it was the weekend or the week of the Outdoor Retailer Show, which was in Salt Lake. So Scott was here. Obviously we were all here. We all used to go down there and walk around and, shoot the shit and do that kind of thing. And we all kind of hooked up at my house to go for a run. And I said, let's go up to Alta. I'll bring it on I call it my bread and butter. I call it ASBA, Alta Solitude, Brighton Alta also. But I said, let's do this, and the run is 12 miles. It's about 3,300 feet of gain. It's not super, crazy hard or anything like that. But that was kind of my bread and butter. So we all went up there and, Anton, classic Anton, everybody pretty much classical. If you don't know any of us, that photo was really pretty iconic again because Hal's got his visor on and his hat's down like that, That was Hal Kerner.
Tony's Scott, shirtless, wearing super minimal shoes.
Absolutely. Scott, decked out a little, and I was just kind of like, it's just my turf, kind of thing. And Ian just didn't want to take the photo. So we started running behind a place called the Shallow Shaft at Alta. It's Uptown Trail. And for me, normally to run to our first pass, it's only like a 1,200-foot climb up there and a couple miles called Twin Lakes Pass. And Anton, of course, just took off. We were all pretty fast back then, so we all running hard. But I think we got up to that pass in like 25 minutes. I think that was the fastest I had ever been there because Anton's like, well, why are you hiking? I'm like, because it's steep, dude, But it was, we're all pretty fast. So there's a little testosterone flowing around, So we kind of raced around that 12-miler. And Anton was like, 12 miles, like that's it, And for me, that was enough. I mean, I'm not really known to be a high mileage guy, right? So like for me, that 12 miles in about 2 hours that we did it in was enough for me. He was ready to go 3 laps probably, The other guys didn't complain so much about the distance, but it was kind of funny how Anton sort of was just like, he was running 150 miles a week probably at that time, maybe even more. So for him, that was his morning run, right?
This is circa 2007, 2008, you think?
Yeah, right in there. I don't know the exact year, but it was around there when we were all pretty fast. And I think Ian lagged behind a little bit. but at any rate, that was like that photo. When I saw that photo pop up on just like Facebook a while back, and I reposted it, because that's one of the memories in my book of like hanging out with my buddies that I grew up ultra running with, racing against, always having beers afterwards, probably always good friends. And those are all those guys in that picture that they're like the kind of friends that, like, I'm sure we all have them, like high school friends. Like, I haven't seen them in 20 years. Doesn't matter. Yep. Same person, right? Mm-hmm. That whole group of guys is like that, I think, with us. And it's a special photo. That's why I posted it. And the run was just a run, and everybody kind of went home and did their thing and back to the Outdoor Retailer Show to, try to get another sponsor or something, whatever we were doing. I always hated to do that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of something we did back in the day when we first got started. But that photo should certainly be in the Hall of Fame. If there ever will be a Hall of Fame.
I'm working on it, Speed Goat. I'm working.
All right,
on it.
all right. I mean, just need some consultation. Let me know.
Okay,
But
you'll definitely be among the first people inducted. And yeah, what a great group of human beings and legends of the sport. And it makes me want to actually just go a little bit deeper on this too, because the last time you and I spoke was on a Freetrail Zoom with Hal before Hardrock last summer. And Hal relayed the stories from the early days of you guys enjoying Hardrock together. I think it was from the 2003 Hardrock where you guys were all camping out in Silverton prior to the race. This is a 20-year-old memory now. And one of the things that he relayed was your propensity to taper aggressively. And maybe this is an example of simplicity, but that basically you weren't running much, instead just acclimatizing, relaxing in camp for the couple weeks before the race. Expand on that philosophy and any other campfire memories from the early days at Hardrock.
some of those we might want to talk about, but but no, I mean, I think when it comes to tapering, whenever we'd go over to Silverton, I'd go over 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. And I did that for many years in a row. I'd save my quarters at work and bartend and then go over there for a few weeks and hang out. And we'd sleep at about 11,000. That's where our camp was. We really weren't even down in Silverton. We were up at Red Mountain Pass. But as far as like tapering, like I always thought when I got to Silverton, like the hay's kind of in the barn, you don't have to go march 20 miles a day on the course 2 weeks before the race to see the course. I mean, granted, it's nice to see the course, but that's just going to make you at more of a deficit, especially because you're at higher altitude. We're sleeping at 11,000 feet. We're not really sleeping that well initially. Eventually it got better, but I didn't want it to rest. We would go out in the morning, and I had my dog with me. My dog actually didn't run with us because we'd be out there too long. So Binger, my dog, would hang out in the truck. He loved it. He didn't care. But we'd be gone 3 to 5 hours. But Hal and Ian would push a little bit more. I would just kind of hang back and hike and not worry about it. But when we got back to the camp, I would just take a nap, relax, chill out, and then we probably drank too much beer at the end of the night with the campfire. And then we always had to make the evening entertaining. I would always bring my golf clubs with me, and we found a perch where you could about 240 yards or so, I think it was, to a little pond down below, and hit golf balls. We rarely would hit the pond. It was a real small, and then we'd go retrieve as many as we could. There's probably a few golf balls up there still, but we did the best to retrieve them too, But that kind of made it fun and entertaining instead of being so stressed out about writing down your chart for your split charts and your times and all these kinds of things that just about everybody does, except me, I think these days. Hanging out with your friends like that and just sitting around a campfire, that's real relaxation, it's real rest instead of being up to the mumbo jumbo of having a real job and working and stuff like that. So we spent a lot of time just basically sitting in our camps and, taking naps. Thunderstorms would always generally build up in the afternoon. So we'd probably hide in the truck if it was bad, But we just had a really good time resting. And those guys, I had run the race a number of times before they did. So I knew the course. I didn't need to go look at, any areas out there. I knew where I was going. I can run that course in my head now, without even thinking. I can tell you every nook and cranny of it, So I didn't need to look at the course then. Those guys wanted to look at it more. So, I mean, that made sense too.
It's funny because Hal wrote an article on I Run Far after his win in 2012, where he references your strategy and that he was influenced by the realization that he needed to rest more before the race.
Yeah.
And he describes that year in 2012 where he was staying in Uray and just doing short training runs on the course and otherwise just relaxing and acclimatizing, and that he recognized that was a contributing factor to his victory. And then I was influenced by that with my 2021 race, and the 5 days before the race, I did basically nothing and arrived super fresh. And anyway, it felt like something that you had originated that had positively impacted multiple athletes, myself included. It makes me want to ask you the story about the driving range that you guys had in the backcountry. I think you still play some golf, and this is something I've wanted to bring up with somebody on the show. over time is just because I don't play that much golf. I usually play like 9 holes once a year, but I view the two practices as being fairly analogous in that it's so hard to be good at trail running and at golf, and you're always learning. Is there anything there that you want to talk about or that you think the audience would find interesting in terms of the similarities and differences between the two practices? Or what about your running careers translated to the golf course and, vice versa?
Well, I think in both ultra running and golf is between your ears, right? I mean, that is so. When you're having a bad patch in an ultra I'm the 100, I'll always mention the 100 mile because it's my favorite, but if you're having a bad patch in a race, instead of getting stressed out or worried or thinking of dropping or that kind of thing, it's what you think between your ears that's going to propel you to maybe just finish the race, even if it's slow. You've got to keep your headspace good. With the game of golf, as hard as it is, you can make a bunch of terrible shots in a row and you make these high scores or whatever. And then, but all of a sudden you make a hole in one on the next par 3. Right. And it always brings you back. So it's the headspace. And then all of a sudden you can start making, whether it's the hole in one or whatever, but if you start hitting a couple good ones, then your headspace gets better again. So you have to keep your headspace together for both sports in order to do really well. And if you make a bad shot, you brush it off and you move to the next one because the next one might go in the hole and every shot is different. I mean, there's so many rounds of golf where I'd shoot 45 on the front 9 and 33 on the back.
You're right. Yeah.
Right? Like, why is that? Because I just kept my headspace in the game. There's a lot of ultras that I've, had a bad patch at mile 40 or 50 or something like that. But then mile 70, I felt better than I've ever felt in the entire race. It's the same type of scenario. You can rise from the dead in ultra running, and you can all of a sudden your swing changes a tiny, a fraction of a millimeter in golf, and all of a sudden you're hitting these great shots. I mean, golf is so. I mean, I would rather be a pro golfer than a pro runner. Not just because of the cash. I mean, the cash is ridiculous, right? But at the same time,
go get signed to Live Golf, Speed Goat. The next announcement.
Yeah, that'd be sick. But it's just like golf is such a rewarding sport, and it's so hard and it's so precise. And if you play the game a lot, like I played a lot, my handicap's like 5, so I shoot.
Damn.
I shoot about mid to probably upper 70s is about, my best round. I've shot under par a number of times.
Unbelievable.
I played a lot of golf when I was young. I played 45 holes a day every single day in the summertime. I played a lot. And that's when you learn when you're younger. You get better. Ian and Hal were terrible.
Feat of endurance.
Yeah, Ian and Hal were terrible.
45 holes, that's ultra golfing.
Yeah, the most I played in high school was 72, and during that 72, we walked everything too, of course. And I made a hole in one on that 4th round on that 72 holes. And now I've got 4 hole in ones actually.
No way.
Yeah. But at any rate, golf is just I do love the game. It's so variable. And when you're reasonably good at it, I mean, there's millions of golfers that are 5 or better handicaps. So, but it's just fun to be out with your buddies and not worry about. And I leave my phone in my car. I don't bring it out on the course. It's like, this is my time, That's the simplicity part of it. Other people are on their phones talking, but I love the game, and the day that I can't play golf would just be rough. I mean, when I broke my wrist at Zane Grey, the very first time I wore HOKAs in a race. Yeah. The first thing I was thinking, like, I might not be able to golf again. I cared about the running. I wanted to make sure I could golf.
Dude, you got to take me out of the course one of these.
I'd love to. Times. I mean, bring it on.
Let's go. I mean, I'll hold you up, and you'll have to tolerate my terrible game, but maybe you could teach me a few things about how to swing the clubs. All right, so let's talk about this HOKA story, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who would love to hear your perspective, and you have had such a unique opportunity to observe this brand explode over the course of the last 13, 15 years, whatever it's been. You mentioned breaking your arm at Zane Grey. I remember clearly when you made the announcement that you were signing with HOKA, this obscure brand nobody had heard of from France. And now, of course, it's this well-established monster in the running industry. Take us into those first discussions with Nico Mermoud and Jean-Luc. Yeah. What made you excited to attach your name to this, at the time, super obscure brand?
Yeah, so I think it was 2009. I got a phone. I had my old flip phone, and I was just in my living room in Utah and Sandy, and the phone rang, and I saw the numbers show up, and it was like it was foreign, and I'm like, what is this? Like, you don't typically answer the phone when you see stuff like that, right? Spam or whatever it is. But I picked it up, and I'm like, hey, this is Karl, and he's like, yeah, this is Nico Mermoud. Do you remember me from France and UTMB? And I was like, yeah, of course I remember you. I passed you, and then I blew up. But I was sure I remembered him, right? But we never talked really at the race either. We just kind of were racers together, and he finished. I didn't finish, so I didn't even see him after that. But again, at the time, I was one of the top guys in the U.S. So, and this is 2 years later, I think, that he contacted me when he was working with Jean-Luc about, with the shoes. And so I answer the phone, and he starts talking. He's like, hey, I have something to show you. I don't want to interrupt with your sponsorship with La Sportiva. And I said, no, what's up? I'm always up for conversation. And it's a lot. I've had a lot of conversations like that. Like, I'll listen to you. Sure. Doesn't mean I'll do something.
Yeah.
But I listened to him, and he was in Salt Lake or in Park City, and he's like, can I come over to show you these? I was just like, not sure what the hell, like whatever. So he came to the door. He had a big duffel bag, and he had a couple pairs of shoes in there. And he pulled them out of that bag, and I was just like, what? What do you got there? And I said, I'm kind of open to talking because La Sportiva is a great company there, so no bad juju there.
Of course.
Wasn't extremely psyched about the shoes that I was wearing there. They were okay. They were Fireblades, if you remember those. But
yeah, I do remember those.
Those are my favorite. But that's what the shoes were then. There was nothing soft and padded. I mean, the Montreal Vitesse was before that. That was the softest shoe out there, and that was my favorite shoe. That's all I wore from Montreal. I didn't care about anything else.
That was sort of the original Montreal shoe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I'm like, fortunately, Nico had the same foot size I did. That was pretty important, I think. That was, that's just luck completely, wow. Right? So he had that one pair, which I still have. I put them on. I ran around the block, like about a quarter mile probably. And I was kind of like, I was wowed by the experience. I'm like, this is unlike anything I've ever felt. This is like a Montreal Vitesse on extra high steroids,
Yeah.
They felt really good. And I was like, wow, do you have another? I mean, I'm like, let me run in them for a little while. And he didn't want to just like say, sign here. He's like, take them for a while. He didn't say take them. I had to kind of pry them out of his hands because he only had like one or two pair there, and he didn't want to give them up, I'm like, dude, so I pried them out of his hands, and I got that pair, which I still have. I put about 700 miles on that pair. Mm. And this, the sole with these tiny little, almost like the HOKA logo wing tread a little bit. Wasn't Vibram rubber. It was just kind of okay. I thought the grip was good, but looking back, it was nowhere close to what it is now.
Right.
But I tried them on, and I ran around, I ran them on the trails, and my buddy Larry would look at me like, what the hell are those things? I'm like, I like them, man. I don't know what I'm going to do here. So after running in them about a month and a half, sort of secretly, I didn't run a race in them. I said to Nico, I said, hey, let me just look at my La Sportiva contract, which back in those days was like 2 pages. I mean, you know what a Red Bull contract is. It's like 30 pages,
Right.
Same with the HOKA, is longer now, but it was 2 pages. Yeah, we can opt out. Karl can opt out.
Opted out.
Yeah, opted out. Like I think.
So, but that's interesting, and what an amazing piece of foresight from you, right? Because this is the heyday of the minimal
Yes.
footwear era. What was it about the energy or the vision or the pitch from Nico and Jean-Luc that gave you the confidence?
Well,
Or was it just the product was good enough?
I think just the product was good enough, really. I mean, like, I was never really into the barefoot thing. Wasn't against it, like, do your own thing. But at the same time, you know, I liked the soft shoe, and I was like, man, these things are ridiculous. I'd love to take these out to Zane Grey, because I don't know if you ever ran Zane Grey. Did you ever run Zane Grey?
Never did. No.
Zane Grey is, you know, super rocky and technical, and rocks are sharp, and it's super techy. So for me, in my opinion, it was a great shoe for that. I'm like, I wanted to run Zane Grey in those things. That was kind of the real test, right? And so I looked at the contract with La Sportiva, and I opted out because at the time they were paying me a little bit of money, but I hadn't been paid anything that year yet. So I was like, well, they haven't given me any money. My first payment wasn't in my pocket yet. So I was like, well, sorry, I'm out. And they were kind of like, wait, what? Is there no negotiating? I'm like, no, I think I'm out. I'm going somewhere else with this. And that was the very beginning. And then I had to, you know, when I sort of wore that pair out a little bit, that initial pair, I'm like, I wanted another pair, right? Like, but those guys didn't have much money. Jean-Luc and Nico didn't have much money, cash at the time. And they're like, well, we don't really have another pair. I was like, well,
I'm supposed to be a sponsored athlete.
I don't have, like, come on. So they had Steve Doolan, who was with HOKA at the very beginning, and another guy, Jay, forgot his last name, but Jay, they had like a sample size 9. Okay. I'm a size 10 normally for shoe. And I'm like, well, I'll take the insoles out and I'll throw those 9s on. Just give me that pair of 9s. and I took them out. They're a little tight on the toe there, but I ran with them. I was able to run with them at Zane Grey. And Scott Jaime was at Zane Grey that year. He was basically my competition to win the race. And Scott and I have always been very close racing. So great race. I took off from him on some rocks, and I was just like bouncing across the rocks without even feeling them because the sole was so soft, and it was just right. I mean, that sole was pretty good. And I got about to mile 40. It was about 41 or so. And I was climbing. I got to a lot of dead tree. There's always dead trees at Zane Grey, a real big dead tree. So I had to reach up to some branches and kind of pull myself over. The branch broke. I reached back and my arm hit the ground. You know, my arm came up. It was completely bent and jacked. You know, I was like, that's no good.
Yeah.
So, you know, I held it above my head, and I had to walk 4 miles to. I started walking, and I saw a couple guys on the side of the trail, and I'm like, are you guys with? They had radios. I'm like, you guys with the race? They're like, yeah. I'm like, really? They're like, yeah, with the race. Well, tell them at the next aid station that I just broke my arm, and I'm walking. I'll get there, you know.
Yeah.
So they do that, and I keep walking, and the guy came to me backwards just to kind of see how I was. And anyway, we walked 4 miles to the aid station, and Scott Jaime had still not caught up to me.
Huh.
So I'm at the aid station, and I'm just holding my arm up. It's kind of wrapped a little bit now, and I'm like, I got to go to the hospital. I'm like, I'm not finishing because if I fall on this thing again, I'm toast.
Yeah.
You know, so I went to the hospital, and they threw some morphine in me, and which was nice, you know. And then they had this thing rings around my finger and kind of straightened my arm out a little bit. But all I was thinking was like, I can't play golf. Anyway, I have a dent in my arm. But
what an auspicious start to your HOKA career.
And everyone thought the shoes was the deal. Karl's wearing moon boots. Karl's wearing clown shoes, you know? And it's like, no. And that sort of was bad initially, you know? Because that was a bad one. Like, well, of course those things are stupid. You know, he crashed in them because they were too big and had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But then, you know, they rebounded a little bit after that.
You've got your own shoe that's now, I think, in its 6th generation, the Speed Goat from HOKA, which is probably the most popular shoe in trail running at the moment. Any life lessons or business lessons that you've adopted based on your observation of HOKA over the last 15 years? Because again, I feel like you've had such an interesting perspective being kind of the first marquee athlete, but like never involved operationally. So you've just had this sort of opportunity to watch and learn.
Never be afraid to ask. You know, I think with the shoe, I mean, it's true. I look around now, I'm like, good Lord, these things are freaking everywhere, you know? I mean, there's so many of them. But that whole idea of a speed goat shoe, it was my idea from the very beginning. But that all came when I was at the Outdoor Retailer Show, and I was hanging at the booth with HOKA because they wanted me there. And I was basically just a guy standing around, typical Outdoor Retailer Show stuff, talking to people and that kind of thing. And I started talking to this one guy who worked for HOKA, had a HOKA shirt on, so I assumed he worked for HOKA. And we're shooting the shit. We get along well. We're talking, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, let's go get a coffee or something. And, later did I realize that it was Jim Van Dyne, the president. Uh-huh. I had no idea he was the president when I started talking to him. And I told him how much I loved him and stuff like that. But I was just talking to another guy, and as far as I'm concerned. But I said, wouldn't it be cool if we had a shoe named Speed Goat and we kind of named it after me, kind of like the Air Jordan, And he was just kind of like, like a day later, like, let's do it. I mean, if I wouldn't have asked that question, the idea may not even have got to the right person, And Jim really liked the idea. And, then it started. And it obviously takes like a couple years to get a shoe actually into production. Yeah. But we started talking about it a little bit. And then all of a sudden it was like, I can't believe this is like actually happening. And so we worked out a little bit of a deal with it. And deal's a little better now.
Yeah.
But at any rate, it was just like, that was like the dream world. A lot of things have fallen into my life randomly. And HOKA initially, talked that phone call with Nico, and then the shoe idea with Jim, and all was really fully random. All I've ever really done in my career is just do what I want to do. Run.
Okay, but so this will be interesting, Karl, because it may feel random, but it takes a special instinct to identify a unique opportunity. And you have been a pioneer, and I'd love to ask you about building a career within the sport, because you've influenced me in that respect. And you were doing it before there was a rubric or a playbook that you could run. Obviously, you were a Red Bull athlete before Red Bull had any exposure to trail running. You were early in the coaching game. We just talked about HOKA. Obviously, you owned and operated the Speed Goat race for a long time before pro athletes were really doing any race directing also. And I don't know, I think your perspective on this would be valuable for not only emerging younger professional athletes, but also people who are thinking about their careers in peripheral industries. Is there anything else from your career that you think is important to mention, aside from just don't be afraid to ask and cultivate good relationships and be in the right place at the right time?
Well, when I was with Red Bull, we were at a meeting with Red Bull called at the Canyons, Gateway Canyons, which is in Southwest Colorado. It's this really cool resort. And a guy named Chris Davenport, who's a skier, Dav, I'm sure.
I know Dav. I know Dav.
A great dude, a really great dude. Chris and I connected and got along really well. But Chris did a little thing, and he talked. The first thing he said is like, have a business plan. Have a plan looking forward. So when you get older, like Chris at the time might have been, he's a few years younger than I am, I think. But at any rate, he's like, have a plan. Don't just go wing it, because, I mean, you can be on top of the game for a little while. Then we've seen it with so many runners. All of a sudden they disappear. They can be winning biggest races. All of a sudden 3 years later, they disappear. But for me, I mean, running is what I like to do. So why not try to see what I can get out of this sport? I'm not trying to get rich out of the sport or anything like that, but I wanted to be able to survive my life with the sport. So when I thought of the idea with the Speed Goat shoe, I mean, that's kind of, middle to later part of my career, but I trademarked the name Speed Goat it's called Class 35. So it's athlete endorsement thing. And I never knew I'd be able to do that. I looked online how to do that. I'm like, it actually happened, which was good, and that just kind of.
So you own the Speed Goat IP. Did you sell that to HOKA, or
no?
You don't have to reveal.
No.
Okay.
I still own 35. Yeah.
Wow.
Right. So, so that has a little something to do with everything, right? So that was like random. I just figured I'd do it. At the time, I really didn't have much money. It probably cost me like $1,500 to make that happen. And at the time, that was a lot of money for me. I was like, oh my God, am I really want to do this? But I did. I'm like, maybe it'll come back to me someday. And well, here we are. And it came back to me, right? But the bottom line the coaching thing kind of was a suggestion from a woman at the University of Utah. She said, you should coach people. I said, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've got plenty of experience being on the trail, but I'm a college dropout. Just, not that I'm proud of that, but don't get me wrong. But it's like, I know, I mean, I get it with running, but I've learned a lot on the trail and running and racing. I'm a good strategist, but I'm not an exercise physiologist or a biomechanics master or anything like that, because I don't think you really need that to be a good runner. But so I decided to give it a shot, and I learned a lot that first year. I mean, the second I put that online, when I had a website put together by backcountry.com in 2008, every day I had a new client for like a month and a half. And I was like, oh my God, I got to learn how to make a spreadsheet. Right. It's pretty simple what I do, but that helped, from a financial standpoint, that made a difference. And, Red Bull was supporting me. They were paying for me to go to races. I wasn't paid a lot of money, but I didn't care. Their help was a lot. I mean, the deal with them. They promote their athletes. They say they want to make dreams come true. And they taught me a lot. And that conversation about Davenport, just saying, have a business plan. Think of what you want to do in the future, because when you turn 50 and no one wants to, sponsor you anymore, what are you going to do? So you sort of have to have a plan. I mean, now where I'm at right now, we have a store called Spiegel Trail Running Company, which you just started. It's very small. I'm learning here. I was learning how to just print shipping labels, for Christ's sake, like the simple crap like that. But that's something for me, hopefully that can grow a little bit, and we'll have our own branded stuff. And that's like the following, like when I'm in my 60s, there's a bit of income generated there, So I'm always looking forward of like, what can I do further? Because I'm 56 now. That's a pretty old guy to still run pro. Also when I'm looking forward, like what is my goal as a runner? Like, I'm not going to go to UTMB and try to come in top 100. What really is that going to do for me? I mean, whatever, right? But 100 hundreds, like here's a focus, because I'm like a 17 to go, and that sounds daunting to some people. But I don't think that's not daunting to me. I'll get it done as long as I don't get injured. So that's sort of the next thing I look forward is like, how can I raise the bar? How can I do something more? In 2006, when I won 600s, it was like, well, back in 2004 or 5 was, how can I raise the bar? How can I do better? So I kept looking forward a couple years of like, what can I do to stay relevant in the sport and survive financially? I mean, I stopped working.
Such good.
Good.
Yeah. It's just, just great lessons. And I think actually there's two examples that I'd love for you to expand on that I think will illustrate how much of a pioneer you were, and especially like seeing what came after you. Those two examples that I want you to share a little bit about are the Where's Karl campaign, which I, again, remember vividly. This was like at the advent of my career, one of the things that touched me in the early days that put me on the path that I've been on for 15 years. And shortly after that, I think was the Pony Express trail project that you did with Red Bull. And again, I think these are two great examples of you being on that leading edge, especially as we emerged into this internet era and where the sport has gone since then.
Yeah. Where's Karl.com? Funny story with that. So backcountry.com, the two guys that started that company, I don't know if you know or not, but they were two room service guys that worked above me, where I worked in a bar at Snowbird called Keyhole. They worked in room service, which was a floor above us. And I'd send them up margaritas. They'd send me down dinner, all the time. John Brzee and I always forget the other guy. But anyway, they were good friends who skied a lot. At any rate, when backcountry all of a sudden kind of blew up, they wanted to have this team, and they had mostly skiers and snowboarders because that was sort of their base. But John Atencio, who was the athlete guy for backcountry, another good friend of mine I skied with hundreds of days, he's like, oh, we should talk to Karl. And I have an idea. How about I wanted to raise the bar again. Like, I won 600s in 2006. How do we raise the bar, right? And I'm like, how about we do the AT and we'll where's Karl.com? People can follow along. We'll have prizes. We'll blog about it because blogs were big back then, right? And Johnny gets back, and then 2 weeks later, he's like, you want to do the AT? I was like, yeah. I wasn't really sure. I mean, I hike on the AT in New Hampshire. I'm from New Hampshire, so I've been on those kind of trails, and I know how hard it is. But I was kind of like, I threw the idea out there, and they jumped on it and read the random thing that came to me, right? And so when they jumped on that idea, they were like, well, how much do you think that's going to cost? And I was like, dude, I don't know, But I told them $30,000, which was a little low. But at the same time, that number, they were like, okay. And then I started talking. Then I went golfing. John Breezy, the owner there, he brought me golfing to his private club, and we played. And John, a terrible golfer. Great guy, terrible golfer. But at any rate, he's like, so what are you going to do? Are you going to do the AT? And I said, yeah, I talked to Johnny about it and stuff. And so the wheels started turning on that. I had to put together a plan of like where I'm going to stop every night and all that stuff. And all I could do was look at maps. Now I know it, but I mean, then I could just look at maps. But that was a really cool initial project. And we learned a lot on that because, it wasn't just, you don't just drive to Maine in an RV with a wrap on it and think you're just going to pull into all these dirt roads that have gates and are closed, and finding those places are, well, you can't get there from here. Well, that's no shit in Maine. It's not that easy. Crew got lost, things happened. But it was a really good learning experience of how to do something like that. So that was when the AT happened, that was like, how do I raise the bar? Another look forward.
But also, it was kind of the first multi-day FKT attempt that was documented on the internet.
Yes, and Jen Farr Davis. I'm sorry, not Jen Farr Davis. I can't remember his name in New Hampshire. My God. But anyway,
Andrew Thompson.
Thank you, Andrew Thompson. He had the record, and it was 47 something, I think, and. Mm-hmm. And that was who I was chasing the record. I didn't have any of his where he stopped at night or anything like that. I just kind of wrote when I did that whole sheet of like do it in 47 days, I was kind of guessing. And but yeah, I mean, that was like the first time it was really online. Even when Jen later broke the record, that she didn't really document it. She wrote the book later, but she didn't really document it. Follow me. I was about follow me, And then, of course, the Warren Doyle story of like, who's this guy, Warren's thing. And that's fine. But that kind of started the whole idea with the FKT, and tracker didn't work. It was terrible at the time.
Well, but I remember you would drop these little like micro blogs occasionally. Like I remember actually the days where things went bad. I think you had to take a couple zeros
in Vermont
in a row that put you off the pace. But man, it was so cool for me. I was like 22 years old following this dude, Karl Meltzer, who I only knew about as this legend of ultra running. And, here this inspiration was available to me for free on the internet. And you were the pioneer there. Say just a few words about the Pony Express thing too, because again, this was new and different. Mm-hmm. And now athletes are doing a lot of these personal projects. This wasn't really an FKT. It was sort of more of like a storytelling exploration opportunity too. And again, you were sort of a leader in that domain.
Yeah, and the Red Bull Human Express is what we called it, and it was also an opportunity to get data for Red Bull. Red Bull loves their data. The time when I went to California, they took blood from me. I'm like, what do you guys even want? But at any rate, with the Red Bull Human Express, I wanted to do the AT again, actually. Initially, but Adam Bebout, who was my athlete manager at the time, he's like, well, this other guy, Todd Barber, and I had ridden the Pony Express Trail on our motorcycles. What if we did the Pony Express Trail? It's the 150th anniversary of the trail. We kind of like to tie in the stories with what's going on. And I was like, really? Pony Express Trail, but starting in Sacramento, the first 3 days to get to like the Nevada border, running on road, that was kind of no bueno. But I got through that part. And but after that, the further I got in that thing, it was kind of like, this is sort of the luxury tour. I told Red Bull I'd do 50 miles a day, and they looked at me and kind of like their face dropped. They're like, 50 miles a day? How much to do 30? I'm like, no, I'll do 50. Whatever. I mean, all I got to do is walk fast, and I get there. I ran 50 miles every day in 10 hours because the trail was, pretty easy for the most part. And it was mostly dirt roads. I went over the Uintas in Utah, so I did make some diversions. But at the end of the day, that became one of the most, like, an enjoyable 50 miles a day, because there was no pressure on me to break an FKT or to break a time. And then the whole thing about, Eric Bells came on, and when I came by Salt Lake, I went right by my house. They forced me to take a day off. I didn't want to take a day off. I was, instead of resting, I cleaned the RV out while the crew did meetings. And I was moving all day. They're like, don't you want to relax? I'm like, dude, I'd rather just get going, let's get this thing done. So it became, and then Eric Bells jumped on, my buddy who has the beard, Eric, who's funny. He made the experience really good too, because you can't get mad at the guy. He's crewed for Wardian now across the country. He's crewed me on the AT. I've got him a couple of crew jobs, which is kind of funny, but at the end of the day, it became more fun than anything. And then Chack went 100 miles on the last day was pretty standard procedure. And playing 9 holes of golf a few days early was also, before the final day, was big. We made it a really fun thing. And then when Per Lundstam, you probably know Per, he came out with the report afterwards. And, he's a data-driven scientist basically, and which is awesome. The guy is awesome. And it was some 30-page report of nothing I could even understand, But for them, it was an idea. We can get data on this guy every day, and see what his body's doing and how he's reacting and all that kind of stuff. And for me, being Mr. Simplicity, they're just Leslie at the beginning, she's like, let's just check your salt. On day 2, I was just like, I'm good right now. I don't need one. I knew what I needed. But they wanted to learn stuff, and I'm sure they learned a lot of stuff about endurance athletes that I don't even know. But that's kind of why we did the pony.
Just to name check a couple of things here in case we haven't explicitly said, Per Lundstrom, who you just mentioned, is I think the director of performance for Red Bull, and Chris Davenport, who we mentioned earlier, is a legendary big mountain skier and ski mountaineer who's been a Red Bull athlete for 25 or 30 years also. So just for our listeners' knowledge. So I guess while we're reminiscing here, can we tell the story from the inaugural Run Rabbit Run 100 in 2012 when you took me to the woodshed, please? Because I think the audience would find this entertaining.
That was a good lesson at school. I mean, I had run a lot of hundreds before that. That race came, an idea was Fred Abramowitz and I sitting in the Hardrock gym. I'm like, Fred, we got to have I want to see a race with real prize money, not this $300 thing. I mean, it's nice and all, but so he's like, I think I can do that. And I was like, really? So I was 39 or 40 at that time, age-wise. And so Fred's like, I think I can get that together. And I'm like, I don't want anything to do with it. I want to race it. I don't want to be a race director here. So I'm telling you now, I want to run it. Anyway, it comes to fruition, and I prepared for that. I rested before the race a lot, But we had, from a field standpoint, you were there, of course. Jason Schlarb was there, right? Dave James was there. I was there. Dave Mackey was there. I think Timothy Olsen was there, right?
After his first win.
Right. So he was, certain contender. All of us were contenders, right? Fred had no belief that I was a contender. He was like, there's no way you can beat these guys. And Fred's always a joker. And I'm like, I don't know. I'll just see how it goes, So when we started that race, and I don't know if you were ever technically in the lead, but Jason and David and Mackey and probably you, I think, and Schlarb were all ahead of me. I was probably in 10th at Cow Creek, which is about mile 30. And we started going uphill, and it was a very gradual uphill bike trail and douche grade bike trail, and running along. And I see Dave Mackey was walking briefly, and I'm like, I can't believe I caught Mackey, because Dave was always super fast, right? And I passed Dave, and then I kept going, and then, I got back to Olympian, which is mile 40 something or whatever at that time. And we're going up, we went up the road to Fish Creek, I think. Trying to remember the course is kind of difficult, but then I passed Dave James going across the road towards Summit, and then we ran down the road, and we ran down to the stadium, then we turned around. And I felt good. You know, I caught Dave James. Oh, now I'm in second or third. I'm like, oh, cool. You know, well, the dollar signs are ringing in my head because this is like, you know, we're only talking thousands of dollars. I think it was $10K to win. So that for us at that time, that was a lot. That was massive.
Huge.
So when I ran down Spring Creek and I was running well and I felt fine. And we came down to the stadium in town, and I got there, and then you were standing there, and I'm like, I couldn't believe it was an out and back, so I couldn't believe I didn't see you coming back up the hill because you were ahead, you know.
Yeah.
And like you kind of were doing your thing, and I was doing my thing, and you left before I did, just 30 seconds or whatever, a minute before I did, and you were walking, I think, and I was jogging, and I caught up to you, and I said, well, come on, let's go, you know, like something like that. And you're like, no, it's all right. You know, maybe I'll catch up or whatever. I don't remember exactly what you said, but I'm like, well, 30 miles to go. It's about when the race starts. And I did. I felt really good then, honestly. And Spring Creek's kind of like not a real steep climb up to Dry Lake. And I think I put 12 minutes on you to Dry Lake. Is that what it was?
You did.
It was like 6 miles, so 2 minutes a mile. And I didn't know that, of course. When you get there, you're running scared in the front. So you don't know who's behind you, how close they are, you know. All you do is keep looking back when you have a straightaway or something. And I just felt great. And I started running up Buff Pass Road. And apparently I had 25 minutes when I got to Summit, something like that. And again, I didn't know. But I just was.
I think you beat me by 40 minutes.
And I was.
And this is seared in my memory, Karl, because you know I was like 25 or 26 at the time. Right. Dave James was racing in his trademark off the front style. Yes. I caught up and passed him at like mile 40, and all of a sudden I'm in the lead of this race with all my heroes behind me, yourself, Tim Olson, Dave Mackey, Dave James included. And then, I sort of have a little bit of a low patch, and, you know, obviously who would have guessed, but Speed Goat himself comes sneaking up behind me, passes me at mile 70, goes on to win the inaugural Run Rabbit Run 100 to take home $10,000. And it was just like, obviously this is exactly how it should have played out. The young, ambitious 25-year-old gets taken to the woodshed by, at the time, a 40-year-old icon, legend, and veteran.
And it's just, you know,
Karl Meltzer. And it was one of the best learning experiences of my career, Karl. It really did teach me a lot.
It was a really cool race. And when I finished and won, Fred was just like, can't believe you did it. I'm like, I was thought to be like an old man at 40. I ran my best years in my early 40s, you know, my late 30s, early 40s. And pretty fast. I mean, you don't have to run that fast to run a fast 100. You just got to be able to keep running to the end, you know? So like I ran a really good race. I didn't really have a bad patch during that race. And again, because I don't really start out fast, I'm not the Dave James off the front guy. I started to get into my groove. And when I started to get in my groove, that's where it happens. You know, like I say now, when I run hundreds, that I'm not warmed up till mile 40. And even if I feel great, I'm not forcing the pace. I just was not that guy that can go out fast. And it just all kind of panned out. And, you know, beating all you guys that were younger was like, I mean, I even won the Masters $1,000. I went home with 11, right? So, it was one of my better races. There's no question about it. But I did prepare. I mean, I didn't run a race before that. Like I didn't run Hardrock that year, I don't think. I don't even remember, but I didn't run a race too close to that. So I was definitely like fresh and I wasn't overworked or anything. I prepared for it. I went there 2 weeks beforehand with Rock Horton, 2-3 weeks beforehand, to scope out every corner and every turn so I could run that race without markers. And that was an experienced person zoning in on his race, right? I know that Schlarb, I think, went the wrong way when coming into town, and he made a mistake and he ended up dropping or something. But he didn't look at the course first, you know? I'm like, if this race is for 10 grand, I'm going to know where I'm going, you know?
See, again, this is a spot where you were kind of ahead of your time, because now the training camp phenomenon, and
Right.
pre-running the course and doing a lot of reconnaissance is standard operating procedure for the professionals. Such a great memory, Karl. It's like, wow, I can't believe it's been 12 years since then, but an important moment in my career. It was the first time I ever earned money as an athlete. I think I won like $4,000 for second place at Run Rabbit. A big shout out to Fred Abramowitz, who you've mentioned here, who I think remains the race director there. And he's sort of a character who...
I'm sorry. And the cool thing about the race is that Fred and Paul, the co-race directors, they've never made a dime doing it. They give it all back to charities and Steamboat. So that, along the whole prize money thing, now the purse is $75K, and they give back anything that profits, which is like $30,000 to $40,000 a year. So cheers to those guys, for sticking with it. And every year I tell Fred, I say, Fred, you're 72. Are you going to retire? Oh, I got one more year in me, But yeah, that was a great memory.
It's so funny. Fred is such a character, and he's been around forever, and he's like one of those people who everybody loves, but he's not really like a public figure in the sport. Maybe I can have him on the podcast eventually.
That would be entertaining.
So let's talk about Hardrock specifically. And what I'd like to hear you talk about is Kyle Skaggs' 2008 performance there, because to me, it almost feels like a Roger Bannister type moment, because you had already won the race, I think like 4 times at that point. Kyle comes and just redefines what's possible on the course in 2008. And then you come back in 2009 going counterclockwise, win the race again for the 5th time. And I think you PR'd by like 2 hours. So if there's anything you want to say about Hardrock in general, or Kyle Skaggs' performance specifically, and how that maybe reframed how you thought of Hardrock in terms of strategy and execution on the course, and if it is a Roger Bannister moment.
It sort of is at the time. I think like when I won the race in 2001, the first time I ran 26:39, and everyone that was there was like, no one's ever breaking that time. You're going to die with that record, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I made a 10-minute detour at the wrong place in Pole Creek. I think it can be faster. But I've always had this theory like in my head that if you can run fast, pretty fast for 20 miles on a mountain course, why can't you do it for 100? And I think we raced differently back then. We really hiked the uphills a little bit more than some of the fastest guys do now. I mean, 21:35 at Hardrock is insanity, in my opinion. It's so fast. When Kyle did it, it sort of didn't really surprise me. I knew I had met him and I had run with him a couple times. The dude was strong. And he was living in Silverton. He was doing research work somewhere up in the lakes. Every day he was at high altitude. It's what he did. He was like Anton's twin in a sense, in terms of their volumes, I think, and what they were doing. So in a sense, when he ran his 23:30 or 23:22 or something like that.
It was 23:23.
That didn't really surprise me that he did it that fast. But I thought that time, again, would stand longer. And then when I ran 24:38, the thing was the following year or whatever, I'm like, this guys are getting faster. And then that Killian Jornet guy shows up, and Francois, and they're around under 22. It doesn't really surprise me that it's that fast, because the younger generation in ultra running now, they start earlier. My first ultra, I was 29.
But what I'm curious about, Karl, is if Kyle's performance made you realize you had a lot more to give on that course.
Yeah.
Like, did he approach it in a way that made you feel like, oh, maybe I could strip things down, go a little bit more minimal, push a little bit harder? Because ultimately you did run a lot faster.
Yeah, a lot faster. I always went pretty minimal. So I was always like, throw gels in your pockets and run it, But, I know it's an interesting question, because I don't think I was thinking like, well, if Kyle ran 23:33, I can run that too. I just thought his time was like, I'm not even thinking that, I was really thinking win. And I was kind of probably thankful that Kyle wasn't there that year. Bummer that he wasn't there, but Troy Howard, I think, was the guy behind me. And, I had one of those days that, what's funny thing is I picked up poles at Grouse Gulch. And they were heavier poles too. They weren't like the super light carbons. and when I got to Uray, I'm like, these things are like cheating. I sort of felt like it was really helping me a lot. I can't really say how much it really helped me, but I was in good shape that year, obviously. it was a year after I had done the AT, which is another part of the whole piece of the puzzle. Every year after I did an AT or pony, I was extra fast.
So that's what I was going to say a little while ago is I remember at the 2009 Leadville chatting with you at Twin Lakes before we had any sort of a relationship, before you had any idea who I was. And I was talking to you about the AT, and you said something about how you'd built this massive base out on the AT, and that was what helped you run the 2009 Hardrock.
Yeah, I really think that's true. Because in 2011, I ran some really good races after the pony too. It takes, to do an AT or a pony like that, it took 4 months to get back up to speed, to really feel like you're recovered. That's a long time to recover from something, right? But that ultimate base that you get, I sort of started coining the phrase more 100 miles is not that far after the AT, because AT was 2,200 miles. What's this 100-mile crap? Like, I can just bust that out in a day and it's over, right? So my mental, again, between the ears perspective was that you can bang this out. You can, just keep your shit together during the race. But it made the 100-mile distance for me seem a lot easier after doing the AT. It was really the suffering that you do on something like the AT is just, it's overwhelming. You can't describe it to anyone until they actually try to do it themselves. We'll see a few people this year have that entertainment.
Yes. Karl, do you have more time, dude? Yeah. Because I have a lot more that I want to.
I got all day, dude. I'm awesome.
Good. Yeah. I mean, we could spend hours talking about the past. Maybe eventually we should do like a Speed Goat oral history, like a 10-part podcast.
Well, you can do 10. You can do 10 of your funniest races. Whatever.
Yeah, we'll do that
absolutely. We have time.
One of the reasons, like, just to kind of bring things closer towards present day here, one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning that I read recently that made me really want to have you on the show now was something that was written in I Run Far back in February in the This Week in Running column from Justin Mock. I'm going to read it here and just have you respond to it quickly. And again, I took a screen cap of this and just texted it to my wife and was just like, God, this guy is just such a legend. And what it says is so it's referencing a 100-mile race that you did in February. I didn't write down the name. Yeah. You can tell us.
It's called the Lovett 100, the Lake Ouachita Vista Trail 100.
Okay. Yep. In Arkansas. And it says, Karl Meltzer won the race, the 100-mile race, in 20 hours, 35 minutes. And Amanda Lynch was the first female in 23 hours, 50 minutes. It was Meltzer's 82nd 100-mile finish, 22nd year in a row of winning at least one 100-miler, 75th ultra win, and 50th 100-mile win. Again, shout out to I Run Far and Justin Mock for publishing that. And they finish it with just wow, period. So, I mean, anything you want to say about that race and particularly what it signifies in this career? It's like the 50th 100-mile win, 22 years in a row, just staggering consistency and longevity.
I never thought I'd hit 50. Honestly, I mean, with all due respect, when I was about with Adam B at Red Bull, he was like, "What do you want to try to do?" I'm like, "Maybe win through." I wanted to pass Ann Tracy at 2,200-mile wins. Did that. Then I'm like, well, winning 35 would be cool. And then I had a client says, you're going to get to 40. I'm like, I'll never reach 40. And then it was like, well, Janos Kouros won 46. I mean, totally different, realm of running. Yep. So different. But that 46 number started to hit me. I'm like, I'm actually close to that, But I have changed my tune a little bit. I'm not running, the most competitive races every year. I really enjoy going to smaller races. Like Lovett is a fantastic course in February. It's mostly single tracks in the woods of Arkansas. It's super low key. I drove my car there. I slept in my car. I scumbagged it all the way. I drove 19 hours straight home right after the race, after I slept for a little while. That's my style, But those numbers that you mentioned that Justin put in there, Justin, I think, my goal is kind of at this point, I didn't go to Lovett to try to win the race. I went to Lovett because it's a good course. It was convenient. I could drive from Colorado, and it's just a cool atmosphere. But I said, well, if I'm in the race at the end, then damn right I'm going to race. I'm not crossing the line holding anybody's hand, So the race just went on, and I was 10 minutes behind the kid that was leading all day long. And when I got to mile 85, he's sitting in the chair at the aid station. I must say, where is he in front of me, kind of joking around? And there he is sitting in the chair. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You know?
It's like Speed Goat or Run Rabbit 2012
Yeah,
with me.
you know, I'm like, you don't sit down, dude.
Speed Goat sneaks up on you. Yeah.
You know, so then it was like, okay, well, game on, I guess, you know. And so then I sort of gapped him and I won by 40 minutes. But the 50 is like, I never thought I would ever get there. I mean, I might win a couple more, you know, I don't know. I mean, my goal isn't really to win. My goal of the multiple years in a row of winning at least one was, I've sort of pushed that aside. And if it happens, that's wonderful. If it doesn't happen, then that's okay too. I mean, when I won in December, that was the one I won last year in 2023. I mean, it was the last race I was going to run. And guess what? The kid was sitting in the chair at mile 80. And I said, well, game on, you're still sitting in the chair. That's how I won that one too. But that's experience, just running your own race and not worrying about others. It's been, to have 75 ultra wins is like, I don't know if that, it's not the most. Someone else says, a couple guys have more than that, I think. But those goals aren't really my goals. I just kind of, by default, if I reach it, I reach it. And I think that has a lot to do with my success, because I don't have that. There's no stress on me if I just run my own race. But if I'm in it to win it, then you're damn right, I'm going to race you. You know? It just happened. And I mean, like, the numbers are, I think when I reached that 100 mile finish, it's going to be Wasatch, which is the first. So that'll be kind of a cool, it doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing them. It just means I kind of want that number to be there. I think that'll be a pretty incredible milestone. If I don't win another one,
Staggering.
yeah, it's a lot. I don't think any elite runner has run 100 hundreds. You know, there's been like 30 something people that have finished that many, but not really an elite runner. So that'll be a number that kind of hangs. That's kind of will leave my legacy back here. And not that I'm trying to leave legacy, but I mean, it's hard to not at this point.
Of course. Yeah, now you got to go for 60,
I
bro.
go
Now you got to go for 60.
Go for 60, man. Don't put this pressure on me, you know. I just want to play croquet and golf.
Hey, I had Jeff Browning on the podcast last year, and the two of you have known each other for a long time. You've competed against each other a bunch, and he's your closest peer when it comes to 100-mile dominance. And I asked him to say a few words about you while he was here. So now I'm going to turn the tables and ask you to say a few words about Bronco. In what ways has he maybe influenced your career or forced you to improve as an athlete over the course of time?
I mean, Jeff and we've raced each other a lot. I've kind of, sometimes I've gotten the best of Jeff. I had to run Rabbit Run. He had a little bad patch and I got out ahead of him. But Jeff and I have gone back. I don't know the exact year we first met, but we connected because we just sort of have that same fun attitude. And when we're sitting around a campfire and shooting the shit, it's like, I mean, Jeff's kind of very different than I am. I mean, his diet's different. He's very, very focused on, it seems to be anyway, of, you know, training hard. And we see it today. He's making films running across the Grand. I'm like, I ran like 7 miles around Ridgeway with a 800 vert the other day, and that was enough, you know. And Jeff's running across the Grand. He's only a couple of years younger than I am. But, I mean, he is – I honestly think, like, if Jeff had started earlier and his focus was running more hundreds early in his career, he'd probably have 50 wins too. Because I'm one of the first few guys that really started running a lot of hundreds in 1 year. You know, I was running about 6 of them every year on average. That's a lot. Nobody elite's doing that now. But Jeff and I, we've always had a really good friendship. Again, like that photo with Hal and Scott and Ian and those guys. He's kind of one of those friends of mine that when we go to a race, we connect. We make sure we hang out for a little bit and just like shoot the shit. And he's a great person. He's a great motivator for everyone, because I think he's 52 or 53 now, and that dude is more fit. I mean, he's still running at the front with the fastest guys. He's still running at the front. When I ran at Coldwater, and he ran Coldwater and won, and he ran like 15, under 16, and I ran 19 and a half or something. And when he started, I was like, see you later. You know, like I'm never keeping up with him. He is amazingly, at age 52, I wasn't that as fast as he, and 52, I wasn't that fast. So he's definitely like taking it into like guys in the 50s can still do this. Paul Terranova is still like that. But Jeff,
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to catch my 50, and I think he knows that that's out of reach, but it's really cool to see.
He's at like
He's got
26 or 27,
31.
I think now.
He's in the 30s. I mean, he's
wow.
not that far behind, but he's getting,
Yeah.
but if he was 40, I'd be like, he's going to pass me, but he's not 40.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to see both of us still pushing the limit and still giving it our best when we're out in a race. And Jeff is, I mean, again, he's one of the best, and he's stepped into that 200 miles thing, and I'm not even going there. I'm not even interested. Maybe 2,000, it's different, but 200, man. It's really cool to see him do as well as he's doing, and he hasn't. I don't think Jeff's been injured or like had an injury that's really set him back for a long time, and I think that's credit to him really taking care of his body way better than I do.
Yeah. Huh.
I like to drink beer and and I just do my own thing, and I don't worry so much about what my next run is. I kind of like every day I get up and I go run and do my thing, and I just have my own focus. I have other things I like to do in my life too, but he's amazing.
It's so cool, man. I mean, you guys are just such legends. And actually, it reminds me in the same way that you taught me a lesson at the 2012 Run Rabbit Run 100, just at this last year's Hardrock when I was snoozed out in the cot at Chapman Gulch.
I know the feeling.
All of a sudden I hear Jeff Browning out without a pacer. And I'm just like, God, this guy in his 50s, what a legend. And you two also kind of pioneered the running 100 milers without racer philosophy. Also another thing that
it's that whole thing is like, it's do what you want the way you want to do it. If you want to use a pacer, that's fine. In the U.S., in our country, pacers are standard procedure. There aren't races that really, other than Run Rabbit Run, there aren't many that have no pacers. But when I started doing it, going way back to 2001, this is a quick story, but in 2001, I didn't have a pacer that year either when I ran 26:39. And the reason I didn't have a pacer is because Nate McDowell, Petra Pierce, and Ian Torrance all were planning to pace me, but they all got injured. And I was like, well, I guess I'll have to run around the woods by myself in the dark. And honestly, I was a little intimidated by that. But then I sort of understood that, you can do it yourself. And honestly, a lot of my races that I've run my best, I've had no crew or no pacer. And I think that, again, goes back to the simplicity thing of it's all on me. I think too many people rely on their crew and their pacer to get them to the finish line. Well, you're the guy that's going to get yourself to the finish line. I understand the motivation factor, and it's nice to have someone with an extra light and then someone to talk to when you're having a down patch. But it's all about you. It's all you on the trail when you're by yourself. You have no one to whine to. You have no one to cry to. If you want to sit on a rock, sit on a rock. I've sat on the rocks many times. I don't sit at aid stations, but I've sat on a rock. So I like the fact that running without a pacer just makes it, to me anyway, it makes it that much cooler. It's just like, I don't need that extra help. And that's always, like I said, learn the hard way. Again, I learned everything doing shit myself. I can move, a 600-pound rock around my backyard. And like, how do you do that? And I jokingly will say, I'll just pick it up. But all you do is put it on rollers and roll it around. It's not that hard. So anyway, simplicity.
All right. So we can start sort of winding things down now, but I'd love to hear you talk about this move to Ridgeway, because that feels like a big new chapter in your life with Cheryl. You obviously lived in Utah for a long time. What motivated the move out to Colorado?
Salt Lake is a busy place now. I moved here in '89 as
simplicity.
Oh God,
chasing simplicity.
I moved here in '89, and when I moved here, I worked at Snowbird. We would go ski every day. The lines were not long, but now, instead of going to the trailhead at White Pine on Saturday here in Utah, there's 300 cars there now. People,
Really?
It's like, it's out of control. Like, it's like, oh my God, that got a little overrated. And it doesn't mean Ridgeway was the call, but the story about getting to Ridgeway is kind of crazy. A girl put a picture of a piece of land for sale on the golf course at the Divide in Ridgeway, and it was $22,000. for an acre on the golf course, comes with golf. So it was cool. I'm like, I know where that is. I played golf there one time when I was at a gathering for a friend who had passed away in Silverton, but that's where he played golf. So I recognized the place. We ended up buying the piece of land. It's an HOA. We said, this is a place we can build a house later. We'll just, build something there later, and we'll be able to play golf. It'll be wonderful. And then I sold my race to Ironman, and that was another whole chapter, but that helped. Let's not deny the fact that made a difference in me moving.
Yep.
The cash factor. But what happened there is a year and a half ago, we went to see a builder in Ridgeway about building the home, and it's about $500 a square foot to build a house there. So 2,000 square foot was the minimum requirement. That's $1 million. And that's a lot of money. I mean, I'm not saying that wasn't out of our reach at the time with the loans and that kind of thing. But ironically, the house that we now purchased, there was a flyer that came to my mailbox here in Sandy, Utah, a week before we went out to see the builder of this house. And it was less than $1 million. And we looked at the property. We talked to this guy. I'm like, this is the guy that's going to build our house. I'm like, let's go look at this one. It has 6 acres of land, which is nice. We looked at that house, fell in love with it because it had 95% of what I wanted to build. And we made an offer on it that same day. And then bing, bang, boom, a month later, I owned a house in Ridgeway. And I was like, the coolest thing about it, Dylan, is that, the house has really cool things with radiant floors. It's designed really funky. It's kind of quirky. But 6 acres of land was a huge draw for me. And it's not near a ski resort. So it's, Ridgeway and Ouray doesn't have a ski resort. So like the mountains are right there. It's a small town. There's no traffic. There's one stoplight, which is Highway 550. And don't speed around Ridgeway. It's a bad idea. Probably going to get a ticket. But at any rate, you go to the trailhead now, even in Ouray, you drive up a dirt road. Subaru may not even make it because it's so rough, and there's 3 cars parked in the middle, and not 300 cars at the trailhead at White Pine. So that was a huge draw, and I've been wanting to get out of Salt Lake for a number of years, actually, because it's just busy. I mean, I miss my friends. Yeah. I mean, I'm in Salt Lake right now, and because I ran Antelope Island, and we're going to play croquet tonight with my buddies, so I missed that. But at the same time, I can't tell you how cool it is to sit out there and look at the dark sky at night when all you can see is the glow of the Big Dipper. It's just like it's very different. But I said to my wife Cheryl, I said, "Well, we got 6 acres of land. I'm never going to run out of something to do here." So it's just it's a cool place. It's got everything that I need.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Ridgeway is sort of like the gateway to the San Juans, just before Ouray, which is just before Silverton, and then also not far from Telluride. You just mentioned Speed Goat, the race. I wondered if maybe we could say a few words about this too. Obviously, you did sell the race to UTMB Ironman. I think you remain the race director for now. What does the future hold for Speed Goat, the race, and how long do you envision yourself remaining involved?
Well, this is my 3rd year as race director under that. So I have a 3-year contract for that. Where it's going to go after that, I honestly don't know. I'm not going to be the guy that's holding out for money. That's not my angle on this. I enjoy putting on the race. I think the race is big. I mean, right now there's 1,255 people registered between the 2 days, and that's fine. I mean, I like to see. It's cool to start what I started, and then it grows to the skyrunning thing, and then that kind of fizzled away because of other reasons. But and then this sale of the race fully again came randomly. I looked at an email and it said, "I'll talk to you," just kind of like HOKA, and I had no idea what kind of dollar figures were going to be involved. I really had no clue. I was like, "How does this even work?" Like, what is it? How do you sell a race? I had no idea, so I was like, okay, well, I'll talk to you. And then it just turns out that, I'm in my mid 50s. If I was 30 years old, I wouldn't have sold the race, but I'm in my mid 50s. It's time for me to sort of, the responsibility of putting it on every year is big when you're doing it yourself. I do a lot of the work of it myself. I put the aid stations together. I mark the course. I do all this other stuff. And now with like someone, UTMB and Ironman owning it, there's different things going on. Some things I'm honestly, I don't necessarily like everything. But at the same time, I like to see it's cool that people love it. And it's cool that when I stand at the finish line, people love to finish. It's still the same race, has a slightly different feel, but it's been really cool to start that and then kind of see it evolve into what it's evolved. And the fact that I was the first race that they approached, or maybe not they approached, but that actually sold. I'm again pioneering, right? I mean, who sells races? I mean, but again, I've been given shit from some people about doing it, and it's my world, like you live once, you die later. And I wouldn't own a house in Ridgeway if I didn't sell that race. So it made me propel my move to the next step in my life, which is retirement. We get old fast. We get older fast, and there's no reason to hold back on following your dreams or what you want to do. I want to live in a place that I don't have to leave my house for 3 or 4 days. And when I'm in Ridgeway, that's kind of how it is. I tinker around the house. I work my coaching stuff online, but I tinker around the house. I mean, to me, there's nothing better than that. I go for my run, and I go run around in the summer. I'll be running around Uray, mostly near Uray, and Cimarron's a little bit because they're a little bit closer than like Silverton. But it's all new to me too. I'm discovering all these new trails that I've never been on in Ridgeway, and all that part of the San Juans, and that's like a whole new experience too. I can run White Pine every day in Little Cottonwood Canyon to Snowbird, and it's a great track. But I mean, I've done it like 9,000 times. I used to run up the thing 50 minutes. It takes me an hour and a half to get up there now. Just like so much slower. But it's just been a cool change. It's different because I don't have all the friends that I had, and that live over there. I don't have any real friends over there yet, except the bartender. And but it's a transition for Cheryl too. That's different because she has a group of friends here, and she still has her job in Salt Lake now, so she comes back a little more often to deal with that. She'll be working from Ridgeway eventually remotely with the same company, but right now she's still working through that. So I'm excited. I've always wanted to live in a small town, and when this opportunity came to me through that random Facebook post of that piece of land and that brochure in the mailbox, I finally can live in a little town that I can go, do what I want to, and I don't have to go through the hustle and bustle of traffic and stuff. The only thing I miss, I think, is golf. I mean, there's some golf in Montrose, but in Salt Lake, I play golf twice a week with some of my buddies. I just played yesterday too, and I like golf. I'm not going to play as much of that, but at the same time, I'm going to hopefully design my own. I have a place on my land. I can hit about 180-yard shot into a place where the green will soon be. So if that comes to fruition, that's my dream world, is to create my own hole. It would be one hole,
All right. Well, I'm going to come over and get some golf lessons before Hardrock this year. All right, so let's start winding down. I could talk to you for ages, Karl, and this has been so fun. So before we get to the final question, just inform people about what you're up to now. Obviously, you did run Antelope Island, 100-miler last weekend. You've run 300-milers already here in 2024. We're only in April. I know you're on the start list for Hardrock. So say whatever you want about other things that you've got going on this year, and if you feel like saying a few more words about the new Speed Goat Trail Running Co., I'm sure people would be interested to hear
my next race
too.
is Hellbender, May 10th, North Carolina. So my goal is to finish 900s this year. Hellbender, Hardrock, Ute, Stagecoach, Rim to River, and then something in December probably on the East Coast. That'll get me at 89. So my goal is to get to that 100 milers. So that's kind of my summer. Pretty simple, right? Hardrock is going to be the beast. When I got in the race, I was like, oh God, I have to run that race. I was like, I heard about it when I was at Devil Dog. I was like, oh man, now I got to run Hardrock. Because it's so hard, it's so much different. But we've opened a store in December. This has been something I've been thinking about doing for a long time, and it's taken a lot longer than I thought. But it's called Speed Goat Trail Running Company. Right now we got 100 miles and not that far shirt on there, some hats, some basic knick-knack things. But we'll slowly bring things into the store. we're also something that you probably may not know of, and probably almost nobody knows yet, is we're doing a run vacation 3 nights, 4 days at Red Mountain Alpine Lodge this summer in August, probably August 8th through 11th. What happened there is I talked to the San Juan mountain guides who obviously know the San Juans, right? They do Colorado ski hut tours at Red Mountain Pass, and they have this lodge up there. And one of the owners of that, or one of the workers for San Juan Mountain Guides, reached out because he wanted one of the old speed goat shirts with the goat man on the back, right? Best shirt in ultra running, hands down. I still see him out there, right? But he wanted a shirt, and I had one left over, so medium. So I got him a shirt, and I said, "Did you guys ever done run tours in the summertime? Like, just throwing it out there, you know?" And he was like, "Well, let's meet me in town. We'll have a beer or something. We'll shoot the shit and see what we can do." And it turns out that San Juan Mountain Guides owns Red Mountain Alpine Lodge, Sleeps 20. It's an ideal spot at 11th out. It's a really cool place. I'm like, I'll even build you horseshoe pits for the summer, you know? But I said, if we do a lot of people will have a camp where there's a speaker about this, that, and the other, a couple different people talking about certain subjects. And I don't want that. I don't want speakers. I'm the speaker. I'm the storyteller. That's the idea behind this, is to get people out there and not to make it extra expensive. It's to make it affordable as well. So it's fair. So it's more like fair to anyone, that I'll take people on run tours through San Juans for 4 days, shoot the shit and stories. And I think it'll make some lifetime memories for a lot of people. And it's really about just about having fun. And like, Dan, who's one of the guys that's, helping with the camp with San Mountain Guides, he's like, people may not ever want to leave. And I'm like, yeah, it'll be like living at my house. I've got a croquet court in my backyard. I got horseshoe pits. I got, I just want people to experience like what it's like to just be a runner, and there's no cell service up there. So there's Starlink to have internet, but we want people to come out there and just to have fun. There's no structure behind it, So anyway, that's coming. That's going to be online pretty soon. Thespeedgoat.com is our website for the store, and then the camp or the run retreat, whatever you want to call it. I hope that goes off well.
Sweet.
And if it does go off pretty well, we'll do a couple of them a year, and then we'll see what goes on from there. But again, back to the business plan, right? Got to do something down the road to keep yourself moving, but. That's kind of what's going on.
But also keep it simple.
That's what's going on for me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep running around and trying to stay healthy.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, I'll include links in the show notes for people to go check out thespeedgoat.com and everything that you've got going on. My final question for you here, Karl, and thank you so much for this amazing 90-minute chat. Who is one person that you admire, inside or outside of sport, living or dead, and why do you admire that person?
Well, when I saw this question first, I had no idea what I was going to tell you, and I'm still kind of lost for names on who I really admire in terms of like one specific person, because I've never really looked up to someone. Maybe my dad. I mean, but that's kind of different. I think in terms of running, I've never really looked up to anyone in specific because, again, I do things the hard way. I always wanted to learn the hard way. And I kind of did things myself. And what I admire is people that I admire the back of the pack is what I really admire, because I've said this years ago that, the lifeblood of ultra running it's not the elite runners in the front. Sure, it's great to see great races in the front and what people are doing over the mountains and things like that. But the real lifeblood of the sport is the back of the pack. A good friend of mine, Natalie, if you hear this, you're going to hear this at the end, but I admire her a lot. When I first met her, I had just won Wasatch in 98. She was a cocktail waitress at Snowbird, and we're sitting on my friend's couch just hanging out having beers, and she's like, I'm sitting there like 2 days after I won Wasatch, and she's like, you just did what? I'm like, I ran 100 mile, I broke the record, I won, da-da-da. And she's like, huh? Totally was off crazy. Natalie was never a runner. She was never an athlete. She was out snowboarding at Snowbird. Natalie's now finished 1,500 milers. I know, right? Come on, Dylan.
Come on, Natalie.
And she ran Antelope Island this past weekend, and they extended their cutoff to 34 hours. Antelope's an easy course. But at any rate, that girl suffers, I think, more than anyone. 100-miler, and I admire anyone, not just Natalie, but anyone who is out there for that long, because it's just having run, the longest I've ever taken in 100 was like 32 hours, which was Hardrock. And those people at Hardrock that run 48 hours, I mean, good Lord, you're awake for that long. Those are the people I really admire. It's really just the back of the pack. And I've always said too, like at Wasatch, Wasatch was the race I would run every year for a number of years. And I would finish, I'd go home and take a shower, come back to the finish line, and I'd watch that last hour. And I'm sure you've seen the last hour of Leadville. Everybody's bawling. Like, it's an emotional time for a lot of people, But those are like the lifeblood. Those people that are out there that long, that have this one-time lifetime goal, whether it's finishing Leadville or Wasatch or whatever, those are the people that make the sport. Which is another reason I like those small races. You see those people that make the sport.
What a great answer, Karl. And this will, I think you'll love this, but I just had Jasmine Paris on the podcast, who just finished the Barkley, and she had the same answer.
Well,
so
there
now
you go.
The audience, I'm sure, is delighted to hear two of the all-time greats, Jasmine Paris and Karl Meltzer, both extending shine and expressing admiration for those at the back of the pack. It's true that they are the lifeblood. Karl, what an awesome conversation, buddy. It's really great to catch up. Thank you for being such an inspiration to me over the years and for so many others. And thanks for finally coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dylan. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and shoot the shit about this stuff. It's we try to make it as entertaining as possible without trying to,
Exactly. We'll have to do round 2 again soon. There's a lot more.
We've only tapped into it a little bit.
We'll close it out there.
All right. Thanks, Dylan.
Thanks, Karl.